All right, Matt. So I'm just gonna make this a quick video. We're gonna go through everything that you need to know. So you're gonna go to your BIOS. You're gonna go to Advanced Frequency Settings, and now my core clock's to 4.7 gigahertz. But this is you might be able to get this, but let's start with something a little bit more stable. And so go for 4.6. So put 46 in here. You'll have the CPU frequency go to 4.6 gigahertz. Here is your XMP profile. Make sure you have this set to profile 1 so it will run your RAM at 3200 megahertz. Then also you're going to go to advanced CPU core settings. You're going to have the same thing in here. Make sure it's on 46 for the CPU clock ratio. There's also uncore ratio. Uncore ratio is actually everything on the chip that's not the core. These also have a clock speed. For me, I was do two gigahertz. I'm sorry, 200 megahertz less than whatever you set in CPU clock ratio. So for me, I set 47, so I did 45. For you, if you're gonna go for 46, put 44 in here. So two less of what you put in CPU clock ratio. This also has a solid effect on performance. It's not as much as the CPU clock, but it does have an effect. Ideally, these would actually be the same number, but oftentimes you can get a little more on the core than you can get on the uncore. So again, just to start off, you're going to go for 46 on CPU clock ratio, go for 44 on uncore ratio. Then you're going to back out of there, and you're going to go to advanced voltage settings. First thing you're going to do is advanced power settings. You can use page up and page down on your keyboard to set this. Put this on high, the CPU V-core load line calibration. It basically prevents the the voltage from dropping too much and increases stability. And then you're going to go to CPU core voltage control. Now, this is the setting that controls how much voltage is going to go to the chip. Now, the absolute, I would say, the last safe number is 1.4. Beyond that, there's a little bit of risk. I've been running mine at 1.4 for a long time, but I also have mine on liquid metal, so it's a lot cooler than yours is going to run because yours is going to be, it's a stock chip. We didn't do any mods to the chip itself. I modified the chip itself, so that's why I'm more comfortable running 1.4 volts. For you, we're going to be a little more conservative, and we're going to start with 1.35 volts. So you're going to put 1.35 volts in here. Once you've done that, you can go and save and exit. One more thing, keep in mind, if you want to control the fan speed, you could set a custom fan curve in here if you want to do that, but that's optional. Okay, so you're gonna save and exit. I'm gonna exit without saving, and we're gonna go into Windows. And now this is part two. Part two is making sure your overclock is actually stable, which is also part two also involves making sure the temperatures are reasonable. So I'm gonna go through that as well in this video so that we make sure that your chip is not, again, the 1.35 volts is totally safe, but we still need to make sure that it's not getting too hot. So we're going to do that, and we're also going to check stability. So if it crashes while you're doing this, all that means is you have to go back into the BIOS, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to increase the voltage a little bit. So I had you put it on a 1.35. Like one step up, you'd go to 1.36. Another step is like 1.37 or 1.375 volts. All of that, though, is dependent on the temperature being at a safe number. So you can continue to increase the voltage up until, 1.4 volts, assuming temperature is okay. So that's the important thing to understand is that 1.4 volts is safe, but it's only safe if the temperature is safe. And the temperature might not be safe at 1.4 volts. It might just be a little too high. So you can use anything to really monitor your temperature. I use hardware info. So for me, you can see, okay, core temperature is, fine. So how are we going to stress test the CPU? You're going to go to your browser. You're going to go to my website, which is zors.dev, zors.dev. Okay, zors.dev. You just press enter there. My website's down. Hold on. Okay, so my website's actually not down. It's just not accessible from that computer the way it's set up. So you're going to go to zors.dev, and then you're going to download this stress test. X264 stability test. Download that. It's gonna download. It's about 500 megabytes. Download that, extract it. You can put it on your desktop, and this is the tool that we're going to use to make sure that your chip is stable, not overheating, etc. So you're going to download it, open this shit up. You're going to extract it. I'm just going to put it on the desktop. Okay, there it is on the desktop. We're going to open it up. And we're going to go, and there's X264 stability test.bat. You're going to press enter on this guy, and it's going to pop up with a command prompt. Now, doesn't matter the log name really, you can just press enter. Loops, by default it's 50. You can put in infinity. If you want to run this overnight, which I suggest you do at least once, when you have what you think is going to be your final overclock, you should run it. You should set the loops to infinity and run it overnight. If you wake up in the morning and your computer's still running, then your overclock is stable. If it crashed, then it's not stable. So for just quick testing, you can just press enter. But if you're going to test overnight, you want to do infinity. Threads. So your chip is actually, it's an 8-thread chip. You're going to put in 16 here. The reason why is 16 is more demanding, is what it comes down to. So despite it, your chip being an 8-thread chip, you're going to put 16 in here because 16 is more demanding than 8, and it's going to stress the CPU harder, and we're trying to see if the CPU is going to crash or not. That's what what we're trying to get to, is trying to either make it crash or not make it crash. So you're going to put 16 in there. Okay, so here we are, and I've put in 16, and now you just press enter. And priority doesn't matter, just press enter. So we're going to use normal priority. And as you can see, the test has started, and it's going to encode this video, and you can see the speed of what it's doing it at. So for me, it's about 3.5 to 4 frames per second, and it will do the same video. Oh, look at that. So what does that mean? That means my chip is actually unstable. That means my overclock was unstable. So if you get this, then your overclock was unstable. That's actually really good that I got that, because now that's what's going to happen. It's going to happen, if your chip is pretty unstable, if you overclocked it too hard, that's going to happen quickly. That'll happen, as fast as it did for me. It just happened in, 10 seconds. So you'll know within a minute whether it's, really unstable. And basically what that means is you have to go back in, and you're going to edit one of those 3 things. So what are the 3 things you can edit if you crash? The easiest and most painless one to edit is CPU clock ratio. You just knock it down by 1. So put it to 4. If it was at 46, put it at 45. You can also do the same for the Encore. You can knock it down by 1. If you're going to knock one down, I suggest you knock down the other. So if you're going to knock one down, you also knock down the other. The other option, if you don't want to knock down the speed, is you go back to advanced voltage settings. You go to CPU core voltage control, and you just add more voltage. So that's the other thing you could do. So I'm going to go ahead and add more voltage for my personal case. I don't suggest you do this. I can do this because my thing is on liquid metal. I do not suggest you go beyond 1.4. So now I'm going to save and exit and reboot into Windows, and we're going to run the test again. Okay, so we're back on Windows after a crash, and I just set a higher voltage. You're going to go in, do the same thing. You put how many loops, 16 threads, and normal priority, and you're going to run it again. And again, if it crashes again, you have to go back, either lower the clock speed for the Encore and the Core, or you can increase the voltage if you don't want to lower the clock speed. Now let's talk about temps here. So let's check it out. I'm going to open up hardware info, which is what I personally use for temps. Now, for me, it's at around 83 on the Core, maximum of 84. These numbers are fine. I'm also mining on my computer, which produces a lot of heat. Anything 85 and under, you are perfectly fine. If you're going above 85, the voltage is just a little too high. Um, so, and again, this is obviously after a heat soak. So after you run it for like around 30 minutes, it's gonna be the heat is gonna slowly increase as well. So keep that in mind. For my use case, these temperatures are fine. Anything 85 and under is perfectly safe. If you're starting to go above 85, that's where you basically like, all right, I can't go beyond this voltage, and you may even want to drop it back a step because you don't want to go beyond really 85 degrees Celsius on the core. But if you're 85 and under, you're good. So let's say you're hitting 85 degrees Celsius, and you're just on that border, you can either knock it down a step or leave it at that, and that's really going to be your max overclock. That's what it comes down to, is the temperature is the final limiting factor. So again, I would suggest you start with what I recommended, which was, I'll just reiterate one more time. I suggest you do 1.35 volts. Make sure you set the CPU vCore load line calibration to high, and then also set the core to 4.6 and set the uncore to 4.4. And that's going to be your starting test case. So you're going to go in, you're going to go to Zors.dev, you download this, you run it, and then you check your temps. And if it crashes, you either lower the uncore and core, or you increase the voltage, and you always got to make sure you're 85 degrees Celsius and under. And that's it.